Are you nihilistic or are you just depressed? Hi, I'm Britt Hartley. I'm an atheist spiritual director at No Nonsense Spirituality, and I do a lot of nihilism coaching. I used to do a lot more religious deconstruction coaching, but now the majority of my coaching job is helping people in nihilism, especially after they deconstruct religion, maybe they deconstruct God, and now it's what is the point? What is the meaning of any of this? So just be aware that today I'm going to be talking about nihilism. I'm going to be talking about even my own bouts of suicidal ideation. So if that's not something that you feel like you can handle today, it's totally okay to skip it. For me, I find it helpful to talk about these things, but that's just me. So you check in with you. So when I was at my absolute worst with nihilism, meaninglessness, what is the point, can't get out of bed, really high depression, really high suicidal ideation, if there was a big red button to end all life on earth, I definitely would have pushed it. My worst thought, like the thought that was hardest for me to wrestle with, was that if I don't have any free will and there's no God and the universe doesn't care that we're here, then I'm essentially this violent robot because you have to kill conscious life in order to eat, even if you're vegan. And so maybe the best, most moral thing to do would be to withdraw consent for life on Earth that I didn't consent into. And it's a brutal realization that, like Arthur Schopenhauer, who's kind of our broodiest, most pessimistic philosopher, and he said, life swings like a pendulum backward and forward between pain and boredom. And I was really stuck on that thought for about 2 years. And I went through the depths of nihilism and the void totally alone. I felt crazy. I felt like I was in the Truman Show.
I've tasted other cocos. This is the best.
What the hell does this have to do with anything? Tell me what's happening!
Well, you're having a nervous breakdown. That's what's happening.
And that I was this video game character. I was totally dissociated. The only thing that kept me alive during that time was my family. So even though I felt like a video game character and I felt like they were video game characters, their video game character cared about my character. So I would get up and it was just this extraordinary feat just to get out of bed, and I would play human because the other humans cared about my character. And then I'd find some way to numb the pain, some gummies, whatever, and go to sleep and do it all the next day. And I wouldn't wish that kind of nihilism on my worst enemy. I truly barely survived it. And now I can genuinely say that I'm happy, I'm thriving. I wake up happy to be alive. I have good relationships. I'm not dissociated. And I wouldn't press the big red button. So, how did I do it? One thing I noticed was that the first time that I did psychedelics, and this is towards the end of my deep nihilism because I was willing to try anything, is that I got a big mental health boost the day after, and it actually shifted some of my thinking. Now, day of, I just cried and cried in my nihilism, even though some of my friends were like in total bliss. I felt the depths of my existential boredom. I remember a friend looking in my eyes and saying, "Are you okay?" And I said, "No, I am so bored." And this is the poem that I wrote on my trip. This is unedited. This is what I wrote on my first trip. I want someone else to know that this is all absurd. Feelings, sensations, words, bodies. I want to look at someone across the room and raise my cigar because they know too and just laugh. But there is no one else. So I go to the bathroom to see my reflection and raise a cigar that I knew. I was here. I saw this absurdity. No one else saw the game. Even finding meaning in the absurdity is just another game. But then there was no I. Laughter. How absurd. Laughter. So it was a rough trip. It was a rough trip. But the day after, um, well, in the trip, it showed me how deep my nihilism was and how deep my existential boredom really was. And I just remember telling my friend, I'm just so fucking bored. But then the next day, I got this huge depression boost. It felt so good. I honestly hadn't felt that good since I was a kid, like before I developed anxiety and depression as a teen. So for me, psychedelics didn't show me things that I didn't already know as far as deconstruction. I had already done meditations where you lose the illusion of the self, and philosophy had already kind of blown up my worldview and my thought patterns. So for me, psychedelics weren't at all a part of my deconstruction, because for me, philosophy and meditation had really done that. What it did show me is that I got this big depression boost, and then I realized that my depression was fueling my nihilism, and my nihilism was fueling my depression, and I was in this downward spiral into the abyss. And that's what I really learned. And so that meant that I wasn't fully seeing things clearly, because at least part of my nihilism was due to depression. And if I wasn't seeing things clearly, perhaps, just perhaps, there was something I wasn't seeing, and maybe there's another way. So this is the thought that I grabbed onto. If life is just a video game and there's no meaning in the universe, then what if I could make a game that I wanted to play just for the experience? And that's when I realized, just like Nietzsche wrote, that he who has a why can live to bear almost any how. I didn't have a why in a cosmic sense, but I could build one in a personal, experiential way. People who play video games don't do it because it has ultimate meaning or just to get to the end. They do it because they enjoy the journey. And the benefit of nihilism is it forces you to be incredibly honest about what a life worth living looks like for you. And it was not the life that I was in. I was in a shitty marriage. I had fake friends. I was in theology school, which I dropped out of when I was at all but dissertation. I hated motherhood at the time. This wasn't it. This wasn't the life worth living. I wasn't in the video game that I wanted to play. So I said, hey, I'm already dead basically inside. I'm a zombie. I have nothing to lose. What if I just started taking risks into a life worth living just for the ride of it, even knowing that the ride ends? What kind of life could that radical freedom create? And the sheer honesty forced by my nihilism pushed me to question everything. I started shedding everything that didn't serve me. Just as Albert Camus argued that the only way to deal with an unfree world is to become so absolutely free that your very existence is an act of rebellion. And that was a thought that I could hold on to. And then I also realized that my depression was making this harder. It was fueling my nihilism, and it was throwing me into this downward spiral of the void. So I started to take care of my meat suit. I started to take care of my brain to see if it helped me enjoy life at the level of experience more. And that started my upward spiral. My improvements in depression and brain health allowed me to see things differently. And then I was improving my life based on radical honesty on what a life worth living would be. And then the two started to feed off of each other until a year later, I was genuinely surprised when I woke up and found myself happy to wake up. Or at least not suicidal when I woke up. And I took big risks socially because I know that I'm going to die. So little things like rejection don't hurt so bad. And then I found friends where this conversation that I'm having with you right now would just be totally normal dinner conversation. And that saved me. And there's such a big difference between like watching a comet hit the earth by yourself and feeling like you're the only one who sees it, and sitting around a fire with friends and talking about the comet and sharing some popcorn. For whatever reason, that feels really different at the level of experience. I dropped out of theology school because I had to be honest that I didn't believe in God anymore. I went to a spiritual direction program so that I could make this job for myself, an atheist spiritual director, which is kind of a job title that I made up, to be honest. Because if my life was going to be worth living, what did I want to do? I wanted to be talking about the deepest, darkest, hardest parts of being a human. For whatever reason, that feels real to me. And I started connecting with people in that space, and I started talking about it without knowing a single person would listen, or not knowing if I would have a single client. And now my client schedule is full. I changed my relationship to motherhood and stopped trying to be all the things and focused on the few genuine ways that I connected with my kids. I started living more simply so that I could have more time to focus on reading and writing and my shows and a billion other things. But it was a spiral upwards. Adding a walk in, sunshine, even though it's stupid that I'm a depressed plant that apparently needs it, and then take a little risk in my life. And then here's another voice over here talking about nihilism, or a little philosophy that I picked up that helped, a little bit of mushrooms, and doing it with people where you can be really vulnerable and naked with. Watching a movie like Everything Everywhere All at Once and realizing that there are many more people who are nihilistic or absurdist than I thought, because that movie was pretty popular. And taking care of my body. So I started to take, like a stress release supplement that really helped my brain. After trying, many things, I found one that really worked for me. And then taking a little bit more risk and intentionality and authenticity, a few more tools, more inspiration. And now all of a sudden, I'm not on a train that's going down into into the void where there's nothing but hopelessness and depression and death. Now I was on a train kind of spiraling up and spiraling out. Now, this is where you might say, must be nice. Like in this economy, I can barely afford to live. And it's a problem. I'm not going to lie. I wish we could sit around and a third of our time be in leisure like we used to before kind of the agricultural revolution. I wish we could just lay around and do art. Like I get it. It's a problem. But what I can say is that you have far more freedom than you think you do. We have this bias where when you read the story of someone else's life, you say like, hey, pick up and move, like get out of that relationship, go do that thing, tell your mom you don't want to do whatever she's saying. It's so easy to see pathways of freedom in others where you see that it's an option. But we have this bias where in our own life we feel like we are stuck, and it's because of various brain biases we have. We have something called the status quo bias, where we overvalue the current state of things because of comfort or fear of change or simply because it's familiar. And this leads us to feeling more stuck than we actually are. We mentally inflate the consequences of making changes in our own lives, and we create a very strong attachment to the current situation, even when we're struggling, like even when we're really suffering. I've seen people reduce their clothing to one outfit in order to simplify their lives and their budget. I've seen people sell everything and live in a tiny home and write poetry on Substack. The benefit of nihilism for me is how it forces you to be honest and also gives you the courage to make changes against the grain of society to actually make your life worth living, even though it may look different. We also have the fundamental attribution error bias, and this bias makes us overestimate personality or character in others while underestimating situational factors. So we tend to think that other people's lives and behaviors are due to their choices, but our story is rooted in circumstances that are beyond our control. And so we have this double standard where we view others as free to act or change, and we view them as freer than ourselves to be able to do that. So you may not be totally free, like we still may have to go to work, we still may have to put food on the table for our children, but you are more free than your brain likes to think it is. And so when we catch that thought, and at least say it's worth trying, because what do I have to lose? What is the world going to do to me that I'm not already doing to myself? And then we start at the same time helping our brain and body move out of depression. When we do that at the same time, that's when I've seen people catch the train out of the void and build a life that isn't escaping harsh truths of reality, but can actually grow to withstand it. So my life now is built in such a way that I can handle me dying, or people around me dying, or elections, or suffering itself. Just like in a video game, you keep pushing through impossible levels because you're actually enjoying playing the game. So for people who say this is only for the privileged, I would say yes and no. Does privilege make some of this easier? Yes. There's a reason that only white privileged philosophy professors could sit around and write about nihilism in their bathtub. Like they had a system underneath them, and no doubt women doing their laundry. It's like when Ralph Waldo Emerson talks about being self-sufficient and independent, but his mom and his sister did his laundry and cooked for him the entire time he was there. Like I get that. But finding meaning, even in suffering, is universally accessible. So Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor, observed profound resilience and purpose in individuals, even in concentration camps, even when they lost everything except for their inner freedom to choose their responses. So in Man's Search for Meaning, he wrote, everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances and to choose one's own way. However bad your life is, it is not Holocaust bad. However trapped you feel, it is not concentration camp trapped. So Frankl believed that meaning doesn't entirely depend on privilege or luxury or control over circumstances. It emerges from how we confront and respond to our own experiences, even the bleakest ones. This perspective can apply to anyone regardless of material situation because it's based on your inner strength and intentionality. So while privilege may make some changes easier, Frankl's insights show that even in conditions of extreme deprivation, people can find resilience and purpose by focusing on what's giving them meaning rather than on external conditions. So some chose to find humor in any situation and they held on to that. Some chose to serve others and be kind and act in a way that the world should have been, even though it isn't. Some decided that they wanted to play the game of survival and see if they could outlive this terrible circumstance. And those who chose something to live for that fit with their own values survived better and had less PTSD if they were lucky enough to be rescued from the camps. So for me, nihilism is now more or less a friend, just like death is now a friend, because it forces me to be honest and laser focused on what kind of life I want to experience. And now I genuinely feel awake in a world that is asleep. And this is when Nietzsche tells us that we will throw a rose into the abyss to thank the monsters who didn't succeed in swallowing you whole. Because when the monsters become friends, you almost thank the monsters because of the life that you've created that can withstand their presence. And so if you've listened to this whole thing and you're thinking like, get me a ticket onto this train, here's a few resources to start. So first, start spiraling the other way. Do one good thing for your brain or body, because having blue colored lenses from depression means that you're not seeing the full picture. And then with that, take one risk in your life. You're already suffering. You already maybe even wish that you weren't born. Change one aspect of your video game so that it's more worth playing. And then we start spiraling up. And if you're feeling like you need more help than that, please check out the link on the screen and in the description for my nihilism resources, where I go over the main tools that I use with clients who feel stuck in the void. I still believe that I'm going to die and nothing will happen afterlife wise. I still don't believe in God. I still grieve the amount of suffering in the world. I still don't think that I have free will. I don't think I'm going to leave any kind of, grand legacy. I think the earth is going to blow up at some point and there'll be no one to witness it. But because I've created a game that I want to play, and because I've taken my depression seriously and worked to keep it at bay, I'm still enjoying the ride without having to have any kind of delusion to make it worth it. I'm still glad that I got to exist and experience being and stick my head out and just check things out and see where I am in the story and talk and eat and watch and play board games. And oh my God, I get to be alive when Game of Thrones is happening. That's amazing. What a lottery. And I can hold both. I can hold the pain of what it is to be alive and the lottery and joy of what it is to be awake. And all things considered, I'm glad it's a ride that I get to take. And I hope my words help you or inspire you to create a life worth experiencing too. Building sandcastles not because it lasts forever, but just for the joy of building them. So stay tuned for next week's episode. Much love from me. And check out the resources if you feel like this is really, giving you water in a place that you're very thirsty. It's where I spend all of my time because I want to be able to help myself and also help others to create a life that's worth living that doesn't shy away from harsh truths. And that's what I do here at No Nonsense Spirituality. Thanks. Bye.